So the story of Ireland seems to begin 20,000 years older than we've once thought. Bone, a caribou bone that was discovered in 1972, was re-examined and they discovered etching on it from human incisions that throws everything we know about the post or latter part of the Ice Age into question. So essentially, 33,000 years ago, the there was ice free in the south of Ireland at least, and this is nearly 20,000 years before what we believed it to be. At that point, you could walk from Ireland to southern England and from there on to the continent. And this bridge between Ireland and England disappeared some 14,000 years ago. And then from England to the mainland Europe, it disappeared some maybe between 11 and 8,000 years ago, up to the Younger Dryas. The land mass was a very different picture, as you can see. Obviously, this map doesn't show ice, but it does show how extensive the land mass of Europe, particularly in the northwest, extended. Much of what's covered in sea and ocean today was exposed, and thus there was greater movement than we probably first envisaged. Again, with the ice melting, this changed. So the ice, obviously, sea levels rose by 135 to 145 meters. The ice melted, and this had the other effect of relieving weight off the northern latitudes. And this weight release also had an impact as land rose in these parts, it sunk in other parts, such as the mid-Atlantic ridge. So the journey began by looking at Newgrange, a very significant tomb and just north of Dublin by half an hour. I spoke to my son, trying to entertain him and tell him something interesting about where he was born. And so I thought I'd choose Newgrange to talk about. It's a passage tomb, 100 meters in diameter. It's got an entrance and a light box, a hole over the door, where on the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice, the sun, as it rises, shines into the tomb and lights it up. It also appears to hold the shape of the crescent moon, which was very significant to those people, the farming people, as that in the spring, the crescent moon is when you planted, but you also harvested in the crescent moon in autumn as well. It took quite an effort and started 3500 BC and was finished about 3300 BC. Significantly, there was 200,000 tons of rock utilized and believed to be much higher than it is now in its original state. Some of the rock came 40 miles from the south and 60 miles to the north. Some of the large stones came by boat from the Irish Sea in some 4 or 5 miles to a harbour that was recently discovered in 2020 and hauled up some 50 to 100 metres up the side of the hill at Boinne. Boinne, literally in Gaelic, means mansion on the Boyne. It is quite a beautiful area. It's situated in the Horseshoe Bend on the Boyne River, some 4 or 5 miles inland from the Irish Sea. It's not alone, Newgrange, in the middle of this valley. It is accompanied by other passage tombs and many henges around in the surrounding areas, all roughly built around the time of Newgrange or a little bit newer. Nowth on the west, and you have Dowth, equally large mound, on the east. I guess in those days they were farmers and they built these somewhat to replicate what they knew of the world. You didn't have cinema, IT, or screens or anything in those days. And so they worked hard, and at night, I guess, without anything to watch, they'd tell stories, I'm sure, dance, all of that, and then look to the heavens, no light pollution, and they could see. I guess they assumed that their creation came from the heavens, and so all their religion and practices were based on that. The bend in the Boyne was significant, as when you looked above at the sky at night, you could see the Milky Way, clear, bright, I'm sure, in that time. And of course, it was meant so much to them. And so, what they seen above, I assume with Bruna Boinne, they tried to replicate below, I guess, and that's why the site was chosen in the horseshoe, which was similar indeed to the Milky Way. And Boinne is the Gaelic word for milk, close to Boinne. It was significant in that they seen it as the white cow. So basically, the Milky Way was the cows in the sky, and when you passed away, that is where you went to the heavens. Until you either came back to another spirit or otherwise. You see this in India, similar, the cow and calf. Again, it's the cycle of life as they've seen it, farming and so on. Indeed, it is quite funny that cow is born. Uh, Limbo is a place for in Christianity where if you're not baptized, it's kind of the in-between ground. And in Gaelic, you have the word limbo, lumbo, which means I am cow. So I guess there's some connection there at some point in history. So, so my son asked me, Dad, how do you know that that's where the sun lines up, the winter solstice? And of course, that got me. Of course, he didn't wait for the answer, really. I held him on. But I found an app online, initially with suncalc.net, and it was at this point I realized something quite special was happening. As I placed it on Newgrange and scrolled out, talking to him, I realized that it was moving in quite significant directions. There are other apps, of course, that showed this more accurately, but I found that the line crossed over Stonehenge, and as you can imagine, as you, if you haven't known about this, is southeast on the sunrise side of Newgrange, and it landed quite perfectly on top of it. Again, a majestic site in itself, um, in the central South England, and again the line moved clear across Stonehenge, as would the same people. In those times, there was no countries or nations as we knew it. All the people of these islands all went through the same hardships and excitement and religion. They shared all this wonder of the sky and wonder of the after and before and life itself. They were clans and tribes, and I guess they communicated, traded, and probably were one larger family. Probably not as romantic as that. Hardships, extreme hardships with weather, but Stonehenge on this was jaw dropping as I noticed at it. But as I pulled out, I seen that it lined up with Paris. There's Notre Dame, the heart of it. And then it went on as far as Giza. Of course, that had me interested, and we know that maybe at that time, 3,500, 3,000 BC, Egypt may not look as we know it today. I noticed then that it moved towards Mecca, and of course we know the Kaaba. Of course, the Kaaba wasn't originally there. It was in fact in Petra, and it moved. You can tell this, of course, as all the mosques line to Petra, and then after Mecca was in some 7 AD, they all point to Mecca then thereafter. So looking at all this, the time frame is what I noticed most different. There's a map with this line, which, sunrise line, or there's many names you could call it. And if you looked at the chronology, you could see from Newgrange, you could see from 3500 BC right the way Stonehenge, 3100, 2000. Of course, there was, like Newgrange, there was earlier builds at Stonehenge. So it's kind of hard to place chronology exactly. Moving on, then we know that the pyramids, so they say, arrived from 2600 BC. So it's very hard to know. And then it ended up, of course, with the Kaaba. This is some 700 plus AD. So the chronology is quite clear. It's always been established that movement of people and civilizations was east to west, and to a degree, I guess that was part of the story. But this shows that there's more of a connection from west to east, at least at that moment in time. When you look at it in detail, running back through it as I did on further reflection, there's 0.0 or kilometer zero just outside the doors of Notre Dame. The line also passes through the Louvre in Paris, so Notre Dame and the Louvre, which is significant in itself. So whilst on a day trip to the south coast of England, we were driving around Portsmouth on the west side of it, and we came up across a small village, Gosport, which is just on the southwest end of the estuary. And to my surprise, knowing that we were driving near the line, we came across a Millennium Y2K sundial that was built for the occasion. And knowing that we were near the line, I checked it on the coordinates, and I think it's a pretty good fit, somewhat of a coincidence, I think you'd say. So there was a lot of learnings, infinite learnings, pardon my euphemism, but that we could take from this. And I guess I'll go through them with you. We've seen that because of the term Major Gaw Thinna, which I knew in Gaelic growing up, that it means between two fires, sort of a dilemma or a decision to be made, or this is your path. And by looking from Newgrange to Stonehenge, instead of bonfires, which is how we know this happened, we know that they placed the bonfires either side in places of the line to measure their route or to calculate their route with the rising sun. Of course, this is Cygnus, known as Bridget in Gaelic, and many mythologies around the world, in fact, from India to Eastern Europe. The Brigantes is one, which were the tribe of northern England, which probably is where the word Britain originates from, as the Romans called them. So the Bridget, the Milky Way bridge from one side, the North Sea, to the Irish Sea. And St. Bridget's Cross was the first go-to. We built these as children at school. There was a technique, and the way you make them, you cut all the rushes or reeds the same length, fold them in half, cut to size, and you start and rotate around to build it. The advantages of this is that you guarantee from the center point you have equidistant arms to the ends. So for measuring fires either side of a line and lining with the sun or whatever, it made for perfect. And they weren't always 4 arms, they were 3 arms as well, a trestle type cross. This is more the northern half of Ireland. Again, they're called St. Bridget's Cross or Bridget's Cross, I guess, because they sort of represent Cygnus. There are many forms of the cross as it moved through. Here you have at Stonehenge, so some 2,500 BC. You find this solar disk, and you can see that you carve out a ladder through the middle. There is a lunar and solar disk found almost a similar time in Roscommon. There you have Goetter's ring, and I see it moves through. There's of course the WEF ring. You see they wear it now, and I guess this solar disk, you see it on. So the cross, you follow, it sets the route you go, the navigation, the path, and you follow the path. And in Gaelic, that's líne an cosán. So I kind of surmise that if you abbreviate that, Ankh probably this is where the Ankh in Egypt got its name, which is the synonymous cross with the ring on top. So líne an cosán became Ankh. And if you look at the origins of the Ankh, you see that there's sandals or footwear and reeds associated with it. So it's not a stretch to assume so. In Ireland, of course, you see here it is a cosán, the path, for used, and of course there's Cygnus in that logo, but it's used quite a lot. So other elements you see, if you look, you see the ankh in one hand, the cross, but you also see what's called the was, which is basically a staff with a crooked head on it, which you can see an ibis, like a goat type antelope. But it also, I connected that with the Shillelagh, a little village in the south of Wicklow, where they found such a thing. What it is a branch and a cut at the trunk, either side on the heavier trunk. And what they used to do is place it in a pork, cook it, and inside the pork. And what you effectively did was you fireproofed it, you carbonized it. Now, why would they have done this with a branch? Well, to make a bonfire, you needed to signal. And to signal with a femur or a bone, yes, it wouldn't burn, but it'd be too short to be any significant use. In other words, you wouldn't see any change relative at a distance. Whereas if you made a long branch with a knot that's been carbonized or fireproofed, you could light large fire on the end of it and it could burn and you could see the movement at a couple of miles maybe. There's the jed, which symbolizes the backbone of the god Osiris. But really it could have been the column of smoke lining up. Um, There's the cross, so you had like the wings of the ankh, as you've seen before, and the jed, the columns lining up forward, ahead. So here we see on Google Photos different generation type, but it clearly looks or takes the form of a Bridget's cross, biased to one side with the main crux taking center. It's also in the NATO logo. You can clearly see that is pretty similar to a Bridget's cross form. Here's the Google Chrome 3-arm or Triskel. Again, it wasn't. We know it as a nefarious term, but in reality, it wasn't originally. We know that it's from a cross. It was a navigation. Here is the UN building in Africa. You can see that it's got the same as 6-arm detail, but again, primarily showing it. And then we have of course, this hand signal for AOK, which really we can take means we're on the right path, basically. Ironically, there's the carbon atom with 6 neutrons, 6 protons, and 6 electrons. Interestingly, 666. But again, as I say, not nefarious in origin, just it's come to mean that in later terms. But again, a lot of these, what we deem nefarious terms, actually started off quite innocently. So the religious emergence. We had the cube we spoke of at the end of the line down in Mecca. And the significance of the cube, as you see in Judaism also, as well as Islam, is that it is the tomb. And it's not so much a solid thing, it's an ethereal solid space, a square space. It's dark, um, and tombs or dolmens or tombs and passage tombs actually, well, aside from rhyming with womb, was indeed a womb for the food, because if you didn't store your seed and your food over winter correctly, you had nothing to eat and you had nothing to grow next year. So storing that, it was essential. And hence, I guess this could be the origins of Mother Earth, and indeed Newgrange, the belly of Newgrange was somewhat like the pregnant earth in the womb inside, or the tomb. Again, an ethereal space without edge, just a defined shape where life was stored and invigorated later. So you have this picture I picked up somewhere, but it nicely describes how it may have been seen. You have the Milky Way, the grandmother, and the mother, which was Newgrange, or the moon, the old moon, and then you have the seed or life inside that's been in waiting, or to give life, to maintain life during the winter, and to begin new life in the spring. You see this, I think, from pictures of Milky Way over the Boyne, over Newgrange, and then you have the bowl for the seed inside, in the tomb or the womb. So grandmother, mother, and child. It's interesting that the eggs are formed when you are when a woman or girl is 5 months old in the womb. So technically speaking, the granddaughter um, is in the grandmother's womb for 4 months. Interesting. Milky Way is Nuit, the Milky Way goddess. As you carry that down to the other side, to the Nile, to the Valley of the King. But also you see the Cygnus is obviously in the vaginal area and Gemini, then to the head. Oh, and now you see the significance of the tomb or womb, because of the Kaaba in Mecca. On the corner you have what represents the vagina, I guess, and the symbolism is to breathe new life from the cube, to reinvigorate, to be born to God, or Allah, as they see it. Judaism, you have the cube as well. Again, you put the messages and commandments in it, again, so that you are reborn on the correct path and journey. Saturn, it represents as well. So Saturn, of course, you see this cube all over financial areas, education, all around the world in various cities. And there's various significance in shapes and so on. So there you have it, the shape that dropped my jaw to the floor, as I'm sure it did to some of you as well. And I didn't see this till later on. But what you have is the blue line, which is sunrise and the winter solstice from Newgrange, taking you all the way down to Giza. And then the dark blue line is from Exodus, Moses escaping with the Israelites to the promised land into Israel. And there you have the orange line, which represents an existing line, which is the Archangel Michael line, or Saint Michael's line, which travels from Mount Carmelite Monastery in Haifa in Israel all the way to the other end, on the southwest of Ireland, an island some 12 miles off the coast called Skellig Michael, or Inishmickeling. And this is where monks or hermits stayed, and sometime in the 6th or 7th century. You know this from Star Wars. It's where Luke Skywalker disappears at the end of Episode 8. And I decided from there I would make a line parallel to the existing lines I found on the grid around the Boyne and Meath in that area. And lo and behold, that line parallel took me straight back up to the hill of Tara. And on the way it passed by what's known as Scota's grave in Kerry, not far from it. Scota was allegedly the daughter of Akhenaten. She died in a battle and was buried there. And other stories, maybe she was a later generation Scota. But the Irish for a time were known as the Scota, and they moved to Scotland, to Goidel of Western Scotland, and hence this is where Scotland gets its name, from Scota. So when I plotted these, that line that goes to Tara from Inishmickeleen goes through some other anomalies, fort anomalies. It even goes through a pyramid that was built by a British Army captain who had visited Egypt. So it is unusual. And of course, while plotting these lines, I hadn't really zoomed out. So I didn't really know until I had kind of joined the dots and zoomed out, and lo and behold, this, well, infinity shape popped out at me. And I guess it's why I'm talking to you now. But yeah, it was a very poignant moment for me. So upon finding this infinite shape, I decided, mostly because I wanted to see what happened if what was in the middle between the two lines. Was there anything significant about it? And sure enough, the Rock of Cashel, County Tipperary, managed to make a pretty good centre. You'll have seen from my other work that Queen Elizabeth visited here, so did King Charles III. And then on the upper end of the circle, it cuts through a couple of key locations near where Prince William and Kate visited. And so it had some significance, and just happened to be, the Rock of Cashel just happened to be between these two lines. So I bisected and roughly plotted all the way down until I got to Torini, Santorini in the Mediterranean, a significant island in itself, because that is another supposed Atlantis location, which was utterly obliterated with a volcanic reaction many millennia ago. So this line, of course, is in the infinite, and I named it the Caduceus line. But in doing so, I decided I would have a look and see what significant about the infinity shape in itself and all these lines. So there's where I started at Newgrange, as it passed through Stonehenge and on to Paris, through the Louvre and Notre Dame. Then we go through the church, the intersection point, Chiesa San Pantaleone, in Italy, up near Vinci. Then we plot it on, it cuts through southern significant old buildings in southern Italy. And there's the Twin Towers. And the reason that's there is because, and that photo actually is sunrise, winter solstice, but was that the two towers, it seems that two fires lit this line, or bisected this line, or the line bisected the fires all the way down to Giza. Not always, but most of the time. And then we have Giza itself. And then as you move up, we have Mount Carmel, which is significant old, it used to be a Templar monastery based there in northern Israel. And then you head on your way back through many single-towered churches crossing the Alps, then Mount Michael off Cornwall in England, and ending up, of course, there's
Inishmikaline, there's that Luke Skywalker on the Skellig Michael. And then you have Tara itself, the Hill of Tara. And interestingly, the stone I spoke of is, before, to the northwest, sunset on the winter solstice, you go to Crom, the giant henge, and it bisects also the border as it is today. And there, of course, who visited that henge back in 2011, I think, was the G8 at the time. Of course, that's all a coincidence, I'm sure. And there's the new One World Tower, which replaced the Twin Tower, which significantly marks all the single-spired cathedrals and churches, Michael churches, along the St. Michael line, Archangel Michael line. And of course, arc we looked at and realized that arc is actually the shape of these lines that they curve to chase the rising sun or setting sun as the planet rotates. There you see it also passes through 33 degrees north, 33 degrees east, which is, I take it as a vector, much like the Ankh gives you a direction depending on the sun, where you go or whatever, but 33 is obviously a vector of notoriety, that's sunset in this case. And then it also, this line, the purple line, the caduceus line as I called it, passes through CERN. And as I said, Santorino, and very significant in itself.
Rock of Cashel to Santorini. And this is the analema, which is how the sun moves through the sky through the year. You can see it gives this figure 8. This shows that each couple of weeks the sun at midday, and you can see the kind of pattern it creates. Here you see the infinity symbol pops up everywhere. Some companies have it, the comms company, some movies even called it. And I guess the FIFA World Cup in 2022, indeed, that was its logo. Some business logos, and of course Meta has somewhat of an infinity shape on it. You do see it everywhere, I guess. So you wonder, are they aware of the connection? Maybe, maybe not. So the alignment curvature question, this is something I asked. So what I did was I got the coordinates of Newgrange and the coordinates of Giza, and I divided them up to incrementally just to see where the curve would be in a perfect world. As you can see, the curve is much rounder compared to the line that I followed from the Mercator map, I guess, from the apps from Newgrange to Giza. Now, of course, the diameter of the equator is larger than the diameter of the poles. So maybe it's due to that, but it's something, just an anomaly I noticed. So the other thing we looked at was the Hill of Tara, and straight away, as pointed out to me, there's an infinity, which it is. An infinity, and if you look at it carefully, you can see the head of a snake almost in it, an Ouroboros, which is basically what that is. So if you look carefully in the upper circle on the central line, you see that there's large bulbous mound ridge, which could be the head of a snake. And this is Greenon at sunset from Tara, and you can see the sky how it looked at that point. Virgo. So there you have what you see laid out and this depiction comes back from many tarot, etc., and it shows the moon and sun. So when I looked at Tara, we know that one of them was called Choch Cormac, which literally means the house of the sun. And he was supposedly one of the best high kings to have fairest high kings, which was a token representative position. And so he was a wise king, some say similar to Solomon, and this circle was the Cormac circle, which is the sun circle. So if this, the larger indent, was the sun circle, the other circle then could be the moon. So if one is the sun, the other is the moon. It's Sol and the Mon, and so Solomon. So essentially, you look and you think that it could be Solomon's temple. Temple in Gaelic means to go around or the surrounding. So the moon and sun surrounding Solomon's temple. Here's a Marcos Alavardo artwork, and again, I guess it's a cult or it's very connected, but he has the sun and the moon. There's the connection of the male and female with the checkers and all there. So that's the intertwining. And here you have, see the triangles. You have a pointed up triangle, the masculine, phallic, and you have the womb of the downward pointing feminine triangle. And they intertwine, and of course you can get the seal of Solomon or Star of David. But so interesting artwork. And then you have the two opposing, the sun and the moon. There's Ow, which again is the intertwined male and female. And of course, this is where life is created, the coming together of the man and the woman, which is, I guess, the light shining through Newgrange on the winter solstice is the sun invigorating the seed for the new spring crops. And that is the seal of Solomon. So when I looked at that also, I noticed that the sun shined directly up through the sun circle onto the moon circle on no less than St. Bridget's Day, the 1st of February. And the motion of the sun moving around would indeed have moved the shadow of the sun around. And this is probably where the coronation with the sword comes from. So St. Bridget's Day, there you have it on the 1st of February. So here is Tara again, and you can see just in the center of the sun circle, this is the one to the bottom center, in the middle of that you see a slight rise and an indent in it, showing that something happened. And I know the Vikings dug out the Stone of Destiny, which is the name of the stone here, and it's said to sing when the true king is coronated, which is interesting. So today that is not the case. The Stone of Destiny is not in what I call the sun circle. It is in fact in the moon circle. So this is where it would have been, and having been there, if it was 3 meters tall or just sat there, it would have cast a shadow on St. Bridget's Day to the moon circle, like that. However, it's not there, it's in the moon circle, which, like you're thinking, doesn't sound right. In fact, it was moved at some point in history. When? No one knows for sure. And on the summer solstice, what happens now when the light shines on the Stone of Destiny, it is not in the center where the cross marks, but it is on the sunset side. And so when sunset happens, it casts a shadow on the center. So effectively, the male element of the infinity at Tara is removed from the scenario. And this is a manipulation to the original intention. Why would that have happened? So the maze, what is that? Well, we know them. This is at Castle Welland in County Down in Northern Ireland, and it was built to commemorate the peace process of Northern Ireland. And there you have the maze. And when you look at it, you wonder. And the maze is where we all live. Well, those not in the know of the infinity. And the reason being, we live in a maze because we don't know the infinity route. So we're kind of lost and we go different paths, but not really sure what we're doing. So we're confused or we're not initiated in the way of the infinity loop. So all these people are trapped in the infinity loop and not really knowing what their true purpose is. There you have a labyrinth type. And these are different mazes, and there's one in a turtle. And what does it all mean? I guess it's, Pan's labyrinth means that we are trapped there. And that is difficult. Here is quite an old labyrinth detail, and you see the keys, you see the eye in the middle, the crown and Saturn on top, and the towers either side, all significant in themselves. So obviously, the all-seeing eye in the middle, we go about our business confused, not clear what it is about. Early in my original video, I discovered lines that were almost vertical. The sunrise line, as we all know about, and then ones to the northeast, which I determined was Virgo on the winter solstice. But I didn't know what the vertical line was really all about. But it's a grid pattern, and that grid pattern, of course, it's curbstone 52 at Newgrange. And this is exactly on the alignment on the reverse side of the passage tomb. And you see a vertical line in the middle of that curbstone, and that, I would say, is a datum line. And I would say that this stone is, in fact, an as-built of what the whole journey to the Middle East was all about. It was an as-built, as in how they designed the drawing, how they designed the plan. Fornox, just a few miles away from Newgrange on that side, and it is again with the grid pattern as well inside, marked on the stones, etched. Similar time. There's the Tokyo Olympics when they had the interesting. And here is the Six Nations, a rugby that's played as tournament played between England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and France and Italy. And it has the grid line. So basically you have the rod of Hermes, or Thoth originally, Hermes Trismegistus. And this is the staff of Hermes and associated with the health professions. Recognize it everywhere. A powerful piece created in Eden by Isu philosopher Hermes, which in Egyptian is Thoth and Enki in Sumerian. There it is, the wings, the rod, and the snakes intertwined. So, branch ending in two shoots and decorated with garlands and ribbons. So there is the caduceus, the purple line that I found. And so about later. So the cult of Cybele. So Mithras, goddess, kind of the progenitor of the world, and there she is drawn on a carriage by two lions. One wonders. And Mithras, and so Cybele, and then this, of course, ties into the. So the thing to note, serpent is a ley and light lines, and so a ley line I would say is something on the ground, and it's kind of could be water, minerals, magnetic, or energy, and the light lines are above the ground. So the serpent would tend to be the ground and tend to be not straight and curve every way. So if you look, I guess a classic example in England is the Mary and Michael line of England. They tend to meander their way through the English heartland to make its way to Norfolk. And there's the Oribus. And there is Happy, where the word happy comes from. As a god of the plenty in the Nile reeds and river. And the Oribus is basically represents the circle of life as the infinity. Things consume to be reborn to feed life. It's all consuming. There are different typical Oribus types, details around the world. It varies from a snake consuming itself to the dragon and lion to the serpent and dragon, varies from China to Mexico. There you have it around again the Theosophy Society, Seal of Solomon, the all-seeing eye, but throughout history. And this is the demiurge. And the demiurge is sort of, as Plato and as it passed through, is I guess the human side of the gods that controls the operation of the infinity line. It's almost like that movie where you see the train on the line. It's a mechanical thing on the ground that is neither, it's an arbiter from good and bad. So here is eels, and the eels pass through, and the last is the baddie, which you find in Scotland or northern half of Ireland. It's a serpent or eel type creature, and consumes all. Again, much like the snake. There's Ireland, and on it you have the river Shannon. There's the Shannon Pot, and this is a pot in the Kilke Mountains where it rises up. And the story is that a princess or of a daughter of a chief, and she wanted to catch the salmon of knowledge here, and she caught it. But the under gods were so unhappy that they swole up, the water swole up, and sucked her back in. She never escaped. The thing is, it said that St. Patrick never killed 11 of these snakes here, and it's unknown how deep it is. But there's the nun, so the Shannon above, how it's translated, but the nun is something similar of the Nile. There's the Oribus again, that all consuming in the waters. They come the cycle of water and life. There it is seen in a dragon form. So here's the demiurge. As I said, this is drawn in 1722 by Bernard de Montfaucon. And again, it represents the mechanical aspect as Plato, or the control, the arbiter, and indecision. It's an absolute, the infinity, and it follows that line. Here's a familiar figure to those growing up. That's Medusa. What do we know? Medusa, snakes, the serpent on her head. And she's depicted Greek as the Gargon, and it's quite a sad story. Again, jealousy and so. In the early depictions, she was portrayed as beautiful, but her hair was snakes, and if you stared in her eyes, you turned to stone. There's the Gorgon. There she is again, many depictions. So she symbolized fertility, the intertwining snakes, um, depicted on the west pediment of the Temple of Artemis on the island of Corcrea. So you looked at her and turned to stone. So was Medusa representative of the moon, perhaps? And how you went one way towards the southeast, and if you looked back and reversed the route, you were doomed. Again, who knows? Those who gaze in her eyes would turn to stone. More depictions. And you see the winding serpent through the Boinne to follow the path. So this is the land path. And this is Newgrange. And of course, we said it was sort of looked like the crescent moon when you planted seed and so on. Moon on Earth. Interesting if you look at a lot of the ribbons for symbols, it's the upper half of the infinity, which would be the moon half, and the sun half would be in the Middle East. And the upper half is very much the British Isles, Ireland, and that part of the world. But it's interesting that the moon shot like Medusa is seen kind of as a descendancy into the underworld, the darker side. Moonfall. There you have World AIDS Day, the ribbon clearly in the upper part of the ribbon is the moon side. We spoke of the serpent and the eclipse, and maybe the serpent idea was that on an eclipse which we recently just had, the moon is consumed by their sun is consumed by the serpent. Of course, bonfires, we see these all around the world. This is in South Korea. So the eyes. So we have eyes pointing, looking each way. The eye of Horus, the eye of Ra, the all-seeing eye, the eye of Providence, all of this. And what is it really all about? Well, the eye I'd said before was sort of the navigation. You look through the cross. When you looked, you had the navigator, the leader, who signaled which way to go. They looked through the cross. So you have one eye looking to the right, and some say that's Ra. Ra looks to the right. And if you look at Ra, and Horus looks to the moon. Now, I'm not sure if this is correct or not, but again, we can look at this in more detail. There you have the sun and moon. Each way, that's Horus. So one eye of Horus, eye of Ra.
There we have the path of the sun during the day captured in time-lapse photo. And why I've done that, well, here we have Ra, or Amun-Ra. As I said before, Amun is basically like Gaelic for a wand, which is spelled similar, or phonically similar, but in Gaelic it's a wand, and a wand means one. So Ra is God, and now Amun is one God, the one God. And over his falcon's head, you have the atom, the sun itself, bore by Ra, and wrapped in a serpent. And the serpent is basically saying that the sun is defined by a path through the sky, defined by the serpent. And Ra basically moves along through the sky on high. And that is the path or the way. However, we have Horus. So Horus is known again with the falcon head, looking the other way sometimes, and wearing the two crowns of the upper and lower Nile, and the serpent again depicting a path. And what path is it? Well, Horus is horizon, and that is Horus marking the steps of our hero on the horizon.
Are very much representative of the navigating path, the path that's plotted out. The all-seeing eye is more peculiar and trickier to work out, but the all-seeing eye would be knowledge of both ways. So Horus and Ra look ground and sky, but also moon and sun. And the all-seeing eye is a combined eye that looks at both, is aware of both directions, the path of the sun, the path of the moon, or Virgo and the planets. You see that from Greek to many traditions. And here is Ra again with the Ankh looking to the stars, the five-armed stars, which makes sense later. Ra and the solar bark, as it's called, both. So here we have the wings. And what do the wings represent? Well, here we have the St. Bridget's cross again, and you can see the arms, the frilly ends, obviously a little bit more frilly than they would be, but very similar to the wings feathers of an eagle, for example. And the eagle with the wings basically is the eyes of the falcon of Horus and Ra, but also the eyes in the directions you go. Is it sunrise in the southeast, winter solstice, or Virgo and moon and planets of the northeast also in winter solstice? So by Ba, the wings also are representative of Ba in Egyptian culture, and Ba represented the spirit as it came to and left the body. You can see it was depicted quite a lot in their sarcophagus. So here we have a coin from 400 BC in Jerusalem, and it's a Persian administration coin. But you can see they have a winged man on a wheel of fortune, and it's associated with Yamud or possibly Yahweh, God of heaven. This is a peregrine falcon, and they migrate from South Africa to Finland and Scandinavia. They do this journey in 42 days, and you can see the path crosses over Egypt and the Nile. So, it would explain the association with Ra and Horus, why the falcon would have been chosen to represent those two, because in essence they flow to the extremes of the sky as far as they could see, and to either the northeast solstice or the southeast winter sun solstice. Also, in the northwest of Europe, the word kit or kite is associated with birds of prey. That's essentially what it is. For example, the red kite. But also you have Kit Tower in Cornwall, which is a key point on some of the light lines. So at 3500 BC, an artifact was manufactured and fashioned into a bird as well. This is from the Hongshan province. Not very big, roughly 4 inches square, but clearly it was war, and it symbolized something important. No, who knows exactly? So here we see an Akkadian cylinder seal dating to 2300 BC, depicting the deities Inanna, Utu, Enki, and Izmud. Again, you see the wings on Enki and Ututu. Here you have the winged archer of Zoroastrianism. Um, again, the wings depicting the directions of the eagle or the light lines, and those light being the sunrise, winter solstice, and the north in the southeast, and in the northeast the Virgo rising with the moon and planets. There's more wings. This is Gilgamesh. So see the two animals, half humans, holding wings, one each way. There's Hera again, looking right to the path of the sun. So here we have bird of prey. Two depictions here. On the left we have the Egyptian seal from 3100 BC, about the time Newgrange had been completed at this point, and I guess maybe the first visitors had arrived. The second is the seal, the Great Seal of America. Now, so the bird of prey appears from, as we said, in Egypt and through Babylon, Greece, and then the Roman Empire. And it's still quite visible, as we can see with the American seal today. On the left, we have Lyra, the eagle bearing the harp of Lyra, and it symbolizes a shield as well. And this has been brought forward into the modern American seal. You can see the eagle, bird of prey, holding in one talon the arrows of war, defense, and on the left the olive branch of peace. So we see the Great Seal again, the US Great Seal. We have the bird of prey bearing the arrows and olive branch, also the flag or lyra similar symbol in the middle. On the reverse side of the seal, of course, symbolic pyramid with the all-seeing eye, and of course the motto of the United States again bears the bird of prey. So the Gnostic seal of the Masonic states of Abraxas. Abraxas, of course, is the Gnostic holy name of God. The national bird on the seal of the United States is in reality a phoenix. And the phoenix and worm, or serpent, we spoke of earlier, regenerates itself from the fire. A certain time elapsed, a worm is produced from the ashes of the former phoenix, and this worm, being transformed, becomes again a phoenix. So double-headed symbology goes back quite a while. Here you have crest the double-headed imperial eagle, and you also have the Muslim version has spirals on the wings. And this Hittite relief again shows the two-headed eagle, and this is 1400 BC. The Scottish Rite symbol has a two-headed eagle. You can see here bearing a sword in both talons, and of course the inverted pyramid, the all-seeing eye, and the crown of stars, and the logo Ordo ab Chaos, Order from Chaos. And then to today we have the coat of arms of the Russian Federation Republic. You have the two-headed eagle looking each way, the winged eagle with a sword and a crown, a laurel crown in the other talons. You have the horse, the white horse in the center, and of course the crowns. You have three crowns, four on the two, one per head and one major crown. Here we have the double-headed eagle of masonry, and you see it bearing a crown and the inverted pyramid, or the female pyramid, the number 33, bearing the sword again, double-headed bird of prey, looking each way, I guess. And interestingly, there's Trump's crest, which he used for this golf course in Scotland, and he's replaced the lions with a double-headed eagle, similar to the Masonic. And again, I guess to emphasize his dual association with Scotland and Germany. So here we see all the, I guess, the evolution of the double-headed eagle, the black eagle, interestingly, or gold, if it's Roman. And you can see how it evolved, from the early Middle East. Saladin had used it. It was also used in Poland, Lithuania, also the Holy Roman Empire, into the Spanish and Russian empires, German. And this eagle, of course, they were in the know, I'm sure. Only true. And there is the Byzantine, which is significant, where the Vikings would have encountered it originally too. So as wise as an owl, you see it associated throughout history, usually with wisdom and knowledge. I guess the knowledge is that, in essence, if you look at the eyes of an owl, it's almost like a combination of the eyes of a Horus and Ra. In other words, it's looking both ways. It's like, in essence, the double-headed eagle, except it's combined into one head because of the shape of the owl's eyes. You see it right through to even Tavistock Institute in London uses the owls. It's the owl of wisdom, and again, the knowledge of both ways. The rising sun in the southeast, winter solstice, and the rising of Virgo planets and moon in the northeast. So nobody can tell you the meaning without absolute certainty, because owls are often thought of as guiding people between worlds or realms. And I guess that's from the dark world of the Virgo to the bright world of the sun. Could it be that the owl represents the left and right eyes of Horus and Ra? I would say so. The way of the moon and the path of the sun, the left and right hand, the left and right wing, the bird of division, wisdom to know the difference. And that's, in essence, how I'd see it. So there's the owl associated with masonry, the square and compass, the measured direction, I guess, and the double eyes, sort of akin to Horus and Ra, as we said before. And interestingly, it makes its way into the architecture, city planning, and this one is quite well known in the community of the Owl of Washington around Congress. And of course, we know the two eyes, as we said, that it's similar to Ra and Horus, or the dark north to the bright south. Because they know both the way of the sun and the way of Virgo and the moon and the planets. There you see it again. So it's basically the eye of providence, the all-seeing eye, is a combination of the two eyes, like the owl, or as we see in the two-headed eagle. And the wings is one wing is the dark, or to the Virgo, as I said, moon and planets, and the other to the sunrise. The dove carrying the olive branch, symbol of peace. You see it in church, episcopology, everywhere. And what it is, that the dove is supposed to have went out from Noah's ship when, after the 40 days and 40 nights of flooding, and brought back an olive branch, at which point Noah knew land was near. Ironically, though, dove in Gaelic means black, or at least in my dialect, dove, which is quite interesting. So dove is white, but in Gaelic it means black, which, you know, and there's the raven, or Odin's raven, Valhalla. And the raven take your flesh and bones and take you to the heavens. So all the black. And there's the black swan and the phoenix rising from the ashes, birth and death and night and light and dark, moon and sun, black swan, phoenix. So the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, is quite a significant occult society, a powerful one too. But here in the imagery you can see the two doves facing each other, but the four wings of the solstices rise and set, and the all-seeing eye male pyramid above this time. And then you see the alteration of the double-headed eagle, but it kind of ties the meaning together. So the pine cone, it's quite an unusual symbol, but it's quite an important one. And what is the meaning behind it? Here you see it, a large pine cone sculpture outside the Vatican in Rome. And you have two peacocks, which isn't obvious. We've seen the doves, we've seen the eagles, the owl. So why now a peacock? And the thing about a peacock, when you think of it, it fans out its feathers in all directions, everywhere. And if you take a good look at the pine cone, it's kind of not hard to see. It's been interpreted through the ages from all ancient societies regarding the brain, the pineal gland, for example, the third eye, and other occult reasons, and yet it's not entirely obvious, or is it? There you have Enki holding it. You have on the caduceus, you see the pine cone sometimes on top. Even the popes have held it. What does it really represent? Pinecone has been known as a symbol of enlightenment, fertility, eternal life, the pineal gland, and all of this is wonderful. But there's the cone. Look at the shape of it. There's the Archimedes spirals and so on. So what is it? So here's the pine cone between two columns, the Masonic columns of Boaz and Jacinth, one with the world on top, the other with the stars and sky on top. So this is a plan view from above of a pine cone, and you can see it spirals. Very much holds the roots of the universe, the Archimedes spiral. Of course, and it can go in reverse as well. So what does it really mean? So in the British Museum is housed these carved ostrich eggs, and the detail is quite phenomenal. And they're from the so-called Isis tomb from Italy's ancient Etruria. So in St. Petersburg, we've housed these wonderful eggs, and they're quite sought after in the high society. Why is that the case? When you look at them, you can see that they're usually highly intricate in design, with gold leaf or gold plate and ornate decorations. But again, why is it so incredibly well sought after? So this is an Orphic egg. You have the crescent moon resting on the summit, and that pattern that seems to be diagonal wrapped around the egg. This is an artist's impression, the same, an Orphic egg with the serpent wrapping itself spirally around the egg, the green egg, and the wings, again, the wings in the four directions of the solstices, set and rise. And the Orphic egg is an ancient symbol of the Orphic mysteries, with the serpent entwined egg which signified cosmos as encircled by the fiery creative spirit. The egg also represents the soul of the philosopher, the serpent, the mysteries. Look at the gherkin and in Iran, and there's the grid and the cone in London. So does these represent a grid, a path, certain routes? So Gaeilge is the English or Irish word for Irish. And what does it mean? Well, you see certain translations it means gyratory, rotation. And when you look back, the Gaels, obviously a derivative of Gaelic, Gaeilge, were these the people that rotated or gyrated, maybe danced, or more likely in their path to follow the celestial bodies? Did they rotate or gyrate around the world, perhaps?
So here you have the Rise sculpture in Belfast. It's just on the west Belfast. It links the M1, M2. It's just right under the intersection. And what you see is an inner mesh globe and an outer mesh globe. And it's probable that the inner mesh is the world itself, and the outer is the grid of the heavens. And perhaps it's as above, so below. And again in Dublin, you see a similar situation with a sphere within a sphere. Again, depicting the mechanisms below on earth and above in the heavens.
So we know of bonfires, and we know there was two bonfires and one bonfire to represent the line. But so what has this got to do with towers? So fire you can see at night, but in the daytime you can see the smoke columns quite clearly. And the reason they would have built a tower is on a mountain you would have had not such an issue because you would have had upward draft up the side of the mountain or hill, and so the smoke would with a good lard, oily type fire been taken to high altitude quite quickly. But on the lower ground it may have been an issue, but nothing better than a tower or chimney effectively, and a good draft to take the smoke column up high. So the towers were essentially to aid distance in navigation. If you had a good tower, you had a good smoke column, straight column, it could be seen further away. It probably tended to be more accurate. And that's when I discovered on my journey the towers seem to be where a fire should be. And then I recalled that these towers seem to be a newer version built on an older version. And of course, the latter Clondalkin Tower, I lived near it and used to walk by it quite a lot and noticed the difference in stonework, totally different build, essentially. So, so the round towers are essentially there already. So we were led to believe they were 700 AD, but they could very well have gone back to 3000 BC. Here's the church in Knockmark and Meath, and you can see it was modified, rebuilt on an existing site. But if you look inside the tower, it's round. On the outside, they modified it to make it square. And this Christianity essentially took over, as I said before, took over existing sites and significant sites and just converted them. That was the way. These towers, quite unusual, are found in Bologna in Italy from the 11th century. And it's funny if you're looking at the name Bologna, I can't help but overlay Gaelic Balliogna, So basically meaning Ballia is town, Og is young, and Na is there, so the new town. But you can see these towers and what they represented, possibly society status symbol, and that status, like the Fabergé egg, is of a time gone by, and how important the towers were to be master and chief of a tower in a certain location. And now we have the occult symbol of the columns. So the columns essentially, as that literally I would say, represent smoke columns, the left and right. They're supposedly the entrance of Solomon's temple. One of them you have the stars and the other you have the world. Now, which way they are is one, which side, some which is to the north and which is to the south. Some say the correct way is looking out. And if you go by navigation and the lines, you would have Boaz or Jacinth to the north, and because of the night sky, and then the world and so on to the south. But again, that's to be interpreted. Here you have them again on a chessboard. You have the triangle all-seeing eye, and you have the moon and sun. And here you have it lined up the other way. So the columns essentially represent smoke columns. Away there's Baphomet, and I would guess it's Venus. But this is Capricorn and Venus, of course, rising in the southeast. So there's a lot on the way. So this again talks about the orientation, and some speculate, and I would tend to agree that it's looking to the south and out, and Boas was to the left, to the north, and that possibly makes more sense. So this is an English excerpt of the Lawer Gabala Éireann, which is basically the book of the taking of Ireland, or more commonly known as the Book of Invasions. It was written by monks in the 11th century approximately, and it was kind of a record, an investigation of the folklore of Ireland at the time. Of course, there were slight bias with Christianity overlays on existing folklore, but there's always some truth in these stories. And so the Fir Bolg were the um, fourth invasion of Ireland, according to this book. Fir Bolg meaning men of the bag or the purse. They were escaped slaves from Greece who previously had been in Ireland as the Nemad, and they were battling the Tuatha Danann, who are supposedly also descendants from the Nemad that flee to the north of Europe, the magical mystery people as they've come to be known. And they fought in the northwest of Ireland, or in Connacht really, more west than north, in a place near Sligo and Roscommon called Cochmagaturad, which is the Battle of the Plain of Towers. Now the thing is, there was no towers supposedly in Ireland. Well, round towers were supposedly built to protect the church property from the raiding Vikings. The private treasures, gold, books, and so on. As I said in my previous video, this is unlikely, as in the base of these towers is clearly much, much older. And here you have reference in this book about the plain or of towers in the northwest of Ireland. And so clearly they were there much longer. Maybe it's hard to date when this approximately was, but you can be sure that it's BC, and well BC if the truth be known. So in Israel, you have the term Migdal, which refers to these, there's still some left, towers, but there were more than just a tower. Migdal Eder is a transliteration for the Semitic phrase for fort of the flock. It's forts or towers, arise here and there in the biblical text. So you see them throughout, and they denote that maybe they're a border post or a watchtower. which kind of indicates an alignment, a connection, a perimeter. They form some part of something, like a grid, for example. It also provided the inhabitants a place of refuge, splendor, and vantage. And I guess, we spoke of family, certain family names, that they would watch over a tower or an area, and certain surnames, Burn, Hill, etc., may indeed Gill refer to these function of the towers and communications. They also are known to have kept sheep and their herds safe inside, from predators and the like. But that's almost like a reference to like Newgrange, to keep the seed, the womb, or the tomb inside. And noted one of these towns, Magdala, the northwest coast of the Sea of Galilee, famous fishing village for the way they used to preserve the fish with salt. This is where Mary of Magdala supposedly came from. And, there you have a reference to Mary, again, like Newgrange, as I'd suggested before. Maybe Moire was kind of like Moray or My Moon on the ground to protect the seed, and also double up as a tower, a signaling post. You have the Mizpah, which is also referred to as a watchtower, watching over me, or the Lord watching over me. A Mizpah is the Hebrew word for watchtower. So it refers to a heap of stones erected to witness an agreement between Laban and Jacob. So that meaning, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent from one another. And that's sort of communication, by another definition, so that they were able to signal to each other when they weren't beside each other, which is exactly what I suggest the towers functioned as. So now we have a tower that acts as a signal with smoke columns and fire, and it also provides similar function to like Newgrange, where it's a womb or a tomb to store the seed and food, and the flock, or the lamb, which became synonymous with Jesus in the Bible. And Laban, we know, didn't necessarily, wasn't a devout Christian per se, and he may have worshipped other gods. And he even says that in Genesis, wherefore has you stolen my gods? He said this to um, Rachel. So, and I've learned to believe that Jacob and Laban may indeed refer to metaphorical terms, and speaking of a time before the Bible was about, or this versions of the Bible as we know them. So again, we look at Lynn Peninsula in Wales. This is the nearest or first contact from Ireland, from Newgrange on the line towards Stonehenge. And you can see these two columns I've found on either side, and they're about 5 kilometers apart, or maybe more actually. And again, this is another function. They're marking a line, a boundary, a perimeter on the way to to Stonehenge. So you can see this shot I took from Google showing you the winter solstice at that time in the morning, and that in the distance where the sun is rising should be, or is, Stonehenge. There we see Notre Dame, and I guess it's the most significant place in Paris, or cathedral. We know it had a mysterious fire a few years ago that, right at the time of the Gilets Jaunes rising, the cathedral went on fire, the roof, and I think it is now reopening. If it hasn't already, it has been repaired, but we never knew what the fires were. But on the front, where we showed you kilometer zero between the front doors there on the line, you have two towers either side. So were they originally two fires? Quite probably. So here is another reference. There's the Twin Towers on winter solstice, and how the sun is rising there is akin to the line I showed you between Newgrange and Giza, the line that I had been tracing, the winter solstice. And then this is the new replacement building, one word tower. And you can see the sun shining straight through, almost Sauron-esque from Lord of the Rings, on the summer solstice. And this would represent, the fires of the single towers and the cathedrals, Archangel Michael cathedrals from Mount Carmel to Skellig Michael. And this, of course, I showed you before, was a memorial, and a picture extract I took from Spotify for an album, in memorial to 911. And there you see you have the One World Tower on top and the reflection of the twin towers in the water, which is, quite representative of inversion and, how two becomes one, essentially, which is very much akin to the Templar motto. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men built. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all earth, and from hence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. And that's from Genesis, the King James Version. So here is the image of the Tower of Babel that we're all familiar with and grew up understanding it to be. It's this conical type tower reaching high into the sky with a spiral, almost Orphic-like winding ramp or stairs, not entirely sure, into the sky. And this depiction of the Russian practice of symbolically burning the Tower of Babel, maybe to represent the power of God over man's aspirations or hubris. And it also appears in modern architecture, like the Bank of International Settlements, for example, where they seem to have fashioned the building on the Tower of Babel for whatever reason. So here is the EU Parliament. Seems to be modelled on the Tower of Babel, but why would they choose such an important building, a centre of where people are united in their voice? Is it to represent all those voices, the 72 languages that came after the Tower of Babel? Interesting choice for something so important. But it was not always so complex. In your local fairground, as it moved from town to town in the summer months and beyond, you have the helter skelter. And the unusual thing is, skelter or kelter comes from meaning working order or alignment. And you can't argue, it looks very Tower of Babel-esque, or Orphic, like the way the slide wraps around the tower in the middle. Blue and red, synonymous with a lot of opposition in politics, in rivalry, team sport, wars. You see these colours everywhere. And where they overlap, you have purple, the overarching colour of both, the common denominator, overseeing both sides of a division. And this is the purple patch. And our rivalries, the blue and red, or whatever colours, you see, one is always depicted as the great religion, the noble populace, whereas the other is always seen as the primitive superstition or backward savages, the wicked despot. There's always one pitched against the other, and you always have purple in the middle of the two, overseeing the chaos and destruction. And the purple power in charge of us all has this wonderful ability, if you want to call it wonderful, to send us all unknowing into division. And they can we seem to be quite easily pliable, malleable into doing horrific acts on both sides. I can't say that either side are innocent in the conflicts, but there's always that overarching force, as in called the color purple or associated with the color purple, that manages the conflicts. You know, you always have leaders are made and brought out, but in reality, it's being organized or orchestrated by this purple overlap. The ones in charge, they can divide us on any issue there is, and God knows there's many issues for us to be divided on currently. So in essence, when we see our red and our blue overlap, we're always mindful there's the all-seeing eye in the center that controls the left wing, the right wing, the far right, the far left, all of these imaginariums of conflict and division. But the purple all-seeing eye, as we note, is forever manipulating our perspective on what's happening, indeed, possibly managing it. Just in case you thought I was imagining the purple, it is an unusual choice for dress wear in all circles, but these circles seem to be quite significant in power and authority and status. And it's clear the world is split in the red and white, and purple will always be there to manage the middle and this narrative. So the purple power, or the purple manager, the divider between both sides that they've split in the middle, are very much the arbiter, the mechanical manager of humanity, akin to the lion-headed serpent of the demiurge that traverses the infinity loop, mechanically dividing us, locking us into this repeated cycle of creation and the Lucifer George line and the destruction of the Michael dragon line to sunset, and we can never escape like Pan's labyrinth. So the demiurge is very much like the train on the track of infinity, and we need to one day break it. They don't mind telling us either, I think, when we see it in such shows and movies like Snowpiercer. Essentially, you have the two classes or divides in society traversing a track eternally, just nowhere to go. It just never stops. Never stops. So we need to find the ability to break this loop and trap, escape the labyrinth. As children, we really loved our board games. Here's Snakes and Ladders, and the thing is, we never really thought much about the origins, but it's safe to say I think they like to tell us a few things. So, how could we interpret a simple game as silly as Snakes and Ladders? Well, we know the snakes, the serpent, the path, the helter-skelter around the world, like the Orphic egg, the Fabergé eggs, and then we had the demiurge, us managed by the purple power, taking us around the infinity loop, or all the grid, the Earth grid. So what could the board or the larger grid? There's the board, is the larger grid. So what is the ladders all about? Well, let's have a look. So looking at the etymology of ladder, Old English head ladder steps from Proto-Germanic haladri, source also Old Frisian hleder, Middle Dutch lederer, Old High German letara, German liter, and suffix form of pi root clay or to lean, source also Greek climax ladder. In late Old English, Romans were Lederstrafe. So you have the leader, which is the two lines on either side pieces, and the Strafe, the leader steels linking the two. So you have the fires linked. So that's kind of like the distance between two fires. And then you have a run of fires, like we said, the Jed before, running in a line. So they would be the leader, leading. lean to follow. So then you have clay from the Proto-Indo-European root meaning to lean as well. So it forms part of acclivity, anticline, clemency, client, climate, climax, cline, clinic. A whole lot of words that you would never have associated with lean or ladder. But there you have it. You had Sanskrit as well, meaning sort of leaning again. And then you go to the Irish clay, to the left of the slant, twist or sway off. Cled in Welsh, similar again, sort of meaning that you're bringing perspective into the description. So you have this line, but as it moves in, it becomes um, concentric, the two lines, the leaders on either side of the ladder, hence the shape, which is what the two fires would do as the distance progresses. So here is my understanding. We have a plane and we look towards the rising astral body and we put two fires with our cross, our Bridget's cross, or Ankh, or disc, and we are Ijagotina. We're between these two fires, and each of those fires moves like a leader line to the next two fires, and we follow in between. And those fires, as they move on to the end, each, if you look through each column, is like the jed stacked columns, as I said, the vertebrae along the spine, along the ground, along the progressing path towards the astral body, be it the sun, Virgo, the moon, or star, or planets, or constellations, who knows? And they link up and continue on. And this gives you the ladder look. And one has to wonder, is this the Jacob's ladder, the ladder to heaven? It makes you question. So here is a limestone depiction from some 660 BC to 630 BC. It's in the Cambridge Museum, and you wonder, is the lines referencing a grid? You know, some say ensure proper canon proportions, but is it possibly a grid of the day? So the game of chess appears to have two origins. The first is India, around the 6th century, where it was brought by the Persians into the Middle East and eventually into southern Europe, um, in its current form about the 15th century. I think the first tournament was in the 19th century. However, in the northwest of Europe, we had Fidgel, which is a game of chess, albeit on what it would appear to be a table tennis bat. But the word Fidgel means wood wisdom, and it's the identical word found in Middle Welsh, Old Irish, Brittonic, and Cornish, which would indicate that it is indeed quite ancient, and was thought to have been invented by Lu, who was the god of light, an ancient god, and played by the Druids and royalty, and it was considered a game that could captivate all these great minds of the time. And even Cuchulainn, an ancient folklore legend hero, was a master of Fidgel. But we will look at this. It is clear that some reckon it's minimum 300 years older than the Indian version of chess, but the truth is that I believe it is much, much older, and indeed the language would indicate as such. So in England you have the Boinne line, and it runs north to south. It's the longest navigable straight line you can do. It goes from the Isle of Wight to Balnakeil in Scotland, and it crosses Firth of Forth. It was identified by Guy Raglan Phillips back in the 60s. He wrote about it, And he also identified the northern part of England in what was Brigantia, which I spoke of earlier. Um, Other parallel north-south lines that seem to be about 12 miles apart. And of course, he found east-west lines as well. I don't know how they were derived originally, but it is interesting. And they form what is now coined the spine of Albion, which is some great researchers have wrote about this. But you can see it pass, it's a line of sight. And much as I spoke of before, there were the serpent lines on the ground, and then these were the light lines, when I believe of the gale. And he traced that. But you can see they form a grid, much like a chessboard. And you'd wonder.
Growing up, everyone is familiar with Alice in Wonderland. It's a wonderful story by Lewis Carroll. It's about a girl who falls asleep and finds herself in this crazy world of queens and mad hatters and talking cats and twins and you name it. And Carroll himself was a very clever man. He was a mathematician, university, very much into logic and all those things. So there's a lot of coding in this book or the series of books. And this is a little cafe, the Whatnot, which obviously is associated or dedicated to memorabilia on Alice in Wonderland. And this is because back in the day, this is a tavern, and a certain Mr. Carroll used to sit in here and write away. And he used to look through the window to the left, which used to be a hat maker's. And this hat maker, his name was Roger Crabb. And he was a Baptist, but took up hat making and became very successful and wealthy. He was involved in a war, Colchester, I believe, and he took a head injury. And this is why people associate what he did next to be a little bit crazy. He went and bought a half acre of land near Uxbridge in Middlesex and decided he wanted to live the life like John the Baptist. Of course, this is probably, most people reckon, the basis for the character of the Mad Hatter in these books. Now, it is interesting that Chesham comes from the river it is built on, the Chess. Everyone knows the game, but in reality the word chess, as I have said before, esh in Gaelic is derived from a permanent walkway, a permanent causeway, so to speak. So like a route or a procession route. And the Chess River runs in a southeasterly direction from the Chiltern Hills, Buckinghamshire, in towards London, in the direction of the winter solstice. Coincidentally, if you look to the northwest of the Chilterns, you look out and this photo is summer solstice, and it just sits above on top of Combe Hill over Chequers. And Chequers is the summer residence of the Prime Minister of the UK. The first thing you note about Alice in Wonderland is that it's split into 12 chapters, like the hero's journey. In a way, it sort of is. Alice falls asleep. She's met with fantasy, outrageous fantasy. The sadness of it, the illogical reasoning behind some of the circumstances and some of the characters. He speaks of the Caucasus race, which is akin to the Elites, the bright ones. You have white rabbits, and then you have the mushrooms and the power of the mushroom people, nature. You speak of royalty, the queen and authority, the hierarchy of it all, and Tea Party and how everyone just has to get along, And then there's the trial, the hearts, and she's confronted with the knights, the cards, and so on. And then it ends with them not liking her and rejecting her for not basically conforming to their way. and how she promptly wakes up. And this is what saved her. So, it's very similar to today's calamity that we live in, when you realize the way it really is. And it's ironic that Carol's grandfather was a reverend in Elphin in Roscommon, just to the southwest of the giant henge, and you just wonder, it's obviously there's a lot of esoteric connections in this and references and code, and how much did he learn from his father of the way? And I'm pretty sure he would have of, the knowledge that would not be known. In his book Through the Looking Glass, we again see Carol, and it's almost like a desperate attempt to get a message across to us. Again, we see 12 chapters, like the 12 heroic steps. We see looking through a looking glass. It means it's like, look to the fine detail, almost as if it's an invite to critical thinking, to dissect what you see. Reference to Tweedledum, Tweedledee, almost like the Gog Magog stories of England. The wool and water, the wool of the sheep, and then the white queens, and the colours come in, the white, and then you have the lion and the unicorn. Again, we know what the lions are, and the unicorn is in particular one of them. And then we have Humpty Dumpty. And again, in recent, when I'm recording this, we've had the king's horses go crazy in Buckingham Palace. Quite a surreal episode. Again, very similar to the egg, which we looked at, being the earth and the grid upon it, and how it cracks and falls apart. So, maybe there's a message, and he speaks again of waking and which dreamed it. He's kind of unshaking. He's telling us what to do. This, as I say, he was a highly logical and intelligent man, and it's very probable that this is exactly what he was doing here, trying to throw a message into the future where one day someone will pick up on it, hopefully.
One has to ask the question. And Gilgamesh, which I broke down as basically the Bright One's permanent way, the Esh, the permanent way of the Gaels, essentially, Gilgamesh. There's that river, the Chess River, in towards London. Again, the causeway. So wattle, the Esh itself used to mean a wattled causeway. This is St. John's Church in London, it's near Southgate. And if you look high up, you can see the brickwork and the turrets and the towers. You see a checkered pattern. And John, the Evangelist, Palmer's Green. There's the Tokyo Olympics checkerboard. Remember the cone, and you had the spiral one way and the other? Remember the Orphic egg and the grid and the Fabergé eggs? You had the grid around it. The grid is sort of essentially the chessboard. Northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest, up and down, north, south, east, and west. It's the grid, black and white, different order of pieces, left wing and right wing, left eye, right eye, and then the all-seeing eye over it all. And there's a Google, there's the WEF ring again, but if you look at a typical Google background, if you look at a picture, always has the checkerboard on it. There's a checker handkerchief in Charles's pocket upon the death of Queen Elizabeth II. She was buried in the floor of Westminster Abbey, a checkered floor. There's the Extinction Rebellion, Harry Styles. There's Kamala Harris in the White House, the checkerboard. There's the Irish Parliament in Dublin, Leinster House, Dublin. Then you have there's the National Lottery checker board, and then the police. The police in England and Scotland have the checkered pattern. So the checkered, this is to the city, I guess, another path to the city, the checkerboard. And if you look at there's a cartouche, and on the top of the cartouche you can see a checker as well. And essentially the cartouche was like a script or a map on how to navigate the journey. These are various symbols that you've learned in the Infinity learnings. So here we are again, the Infinity Loop, as it passes from Newgrange to Giza to Mount Carmel, back through Italy and the crossing point near Vinci, up to the Skellig Michael, and all the way back up to the Hill of Tara. And what could that possibly have to do with the rainbow beyond first sight, l'arc-en-ciel au-delà du premier regard? What does it all entail? How is this connected?
So there you have, as we see before, the arc of the sun, its path through the day sky. It's a curve, isn't it? It arcs across. There's the rainbow. This is below on the ground, never quite touching it, but never quite fixed, but it's below, as the sun is above. But it also refers to the arc of the planets as they rise in the east and set in the west at night, because the day just doesn't refer to the daytime or daylight alone. It refers to the whole 24 hours, day and night. It's just a different type of light. Just as the Milky Way does the same.
So here we have the arc of the planets, the different colors associated with the different planets around the solar system, around the sun. And there's an animation, and again, this is the rainbow above, I believe. So the Ark of the Covenant. So we know when we looked at the infinity lines, as I drew it, they were lines on a Mercator map, the straight line from Newgrange through Stonehenge, Paris, Italy, and on to Giza and Mecca, and eventually was straight. But once you superimpose that onto a globe, it became an arc. And so did the Michael line on return, a straight line on a Mercator map, a flat map, square map, a rectangular map. Once you place it on a globe, it becomes curved to match the rotation of the Earth and the rising of the sun. So we also looked at angel. We know angel in Greek origin is messenger, but a messenger is also a line, a direct line or an arc line or a curved line. So angel, an angle. Which way do you go? Well, you're going the angle of the rising sun, or you're going the other way, which is the angle of the setting sun. So the two angel wings on the Ark of the Covenant, covenant meaning promise, as in a certainty, which is essentially what a covenant means. When you're on the infinity loop, you stick to it, because if you don't know how to break it and get out, or even if you're on it, you're following these Ark of the Covenant, the two arcs. And that, I think, is what the wings of the two angels mean. And the tablets, of course, the Ten Commandments are supposed to be within the Ark of the Covenant. And in truth, I think the arcs refer to the different angles of the infinity loop. The two wings of the angel, or the angle. So angel means like a messenger in Old Greek, but you have to go further back, and really it is an angle, because that takes you to God as well, a message from God following the sun or the planets which they worshipped. And the wings again, which way do you go? The left wing or the right wing? There's Archangel Michael and Lucifer. These are the archangels. So you have Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Meteron. You have all these that I will explain what El and On means later. There's the Ark to Constantine in Rome. Then you see on the browser's Ark browser, you have the Ark, the universities, you have Trust Ark, which we know on a lot of websites, paying things. You have the Arc de Triomphe d'Italie, which we're all familiar with. You have the certain business enterprises Arc. There's sort of alignment, a pathway, a causeway, like a chessboard, Arc. Application register in the UK is an Arc, funny enough. Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel. Arches. So plenty of them. There's the Arc registers council. So whilst plotting the line and having referred to the Ark of the Covenant and what Ark actually means, an angel and so on, this was a line I drew from Greenon meaning sun, and it is the centre henge I found on the border between the north and south of Ireland, the line where the sunset line passes through from Tara, the hill of Tara, from where the Stone of Destiny was moved to on the moon circle. And this line I've plotted, it's sunrise from Greenon, and it moves through Old Sauron on towards France. In fact, it passes through Rouen and on to where Joan of Arc was burned at the stake. Joan or John of Arc, Ion of Arc, is the patron saint of France, and she was an unusual character, but she was captured and burned at the stake by the English after she refused to renounce God, or that she was fighting for God in these battles. So there's Joan of Arc. See her carrying the flag IHS, which is Jesus. And Joan was unique. She was a tomboy, so to speak. And she won the hearts of the French fighting the English, northern France, and led them to some victories. Eventually she was caught and burned at the stake in Rouen. She had many admirers. Ignatius of Loyola admired her, and he founded the Jesuits, which again is synonymous with the sun ray symbol and the IHS sign of Jesus. Also, George Bernard Shaw, Nobel Prize winner, who famous eugenicist, also an occult, was very keen on and wrote on Joan of Arc, as did Mark Twain. And basically IHS is the sort of the path of the highness, the high path of Jesus. So in the next section, I'm going to look at the tour, the tree, word, and the ring. And yes, I know it may sound confusing, but hopefully I'll bring it all to make sense. And we'll look at the certain elements of our society, and I'll look at what else we can interpret from alignments. And we will look at language, and particularly letters, and where and how the written letters came from, what do they mean, and can we do or interpret anything from that.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You're only waiting for this moment to rise. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see all your life. You're only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of a dark blind. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to rise. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly, blackbird fly.